After 19 years of devotion, the man Nicole once saved has finally spoken. But what he said wasn't what anyone expected. This isn't a story about fame or failure. It's about a man who built his life on gratitude. And the moment the world began to call him ungrateful, what really happened between Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman? What truth hides beneath the headlines, between the whispers of betrayal and the echoes of love? Through verified interviews, public records, and unseen stage footage, we uncover how love can rescue you and still break you. So stay until the end, because the shocking truth behind his so-called betrayal might not be betrayal at all. They said love saved him, but they forgot what it cost. On June 25th, 2006, Nicole Kidman walked down the aisle in Sydney, Australia, toward the man she believed she could help heal, Keith Urban. 4 months later, he checked himself into rehab with Nicole by his side, proving that wedding vows can sometimes look less like celebration and more like triage. Years later, Keith admitted that she staged the intervention that turned him toward sobriety. "I was very, very blessed," he said. And off he went, chasing redemption one note at a time. Gratitude became his anthem. It lived not only in interviews, but in the very songs he sang. In 2017, he revealed that The Fighter, the song that became their symbol, was inspired by those fragile early days of love and survival, a promise to hold on when the ground beneath them trembled. But then, the timeline bent. On September 30th, 2025, court papers in Nashville confirmed that Nicole Kidman had filed for divorce after 19 years of marriage. The reason? Irreconcilable differences. The documents were silent, but the internet was not. A performance clip surfaced, Keith Urban on the stage singing The Fighter, but changing one single line. Where he once sang, "I'll fight for you," he now sang, "Sometimes the fight means letting go." To the tabloids, it was a message. To fans, it was betrayal. To the world, it was the end of a love story that had once felt unbreakable. But maybe the truth is not that simple. Maybe it's not about betrayal or bitterness at all. Maybe it's about how gratitude can turn into guilt, how saying thank you every day can start to feel like a debt you can never repay, how music, once meant to heal, can reopen the very wounds it tried to close. This story begins not with a scandal, but with a question. What does love actually owe? He was the man the world once thanked Nicole for saving, and now the man the internet thanked for nothing. In the first week of October 2025, Nashville woke up to headlines no one wanted to believe. After 19 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, Hollywood's emblem of resilience, were no longer together. The divorce filings were calm, quiet, and devastatingly simple. Irreconcilable differences. No mention of infidelity, no financial war, no public fight, just the soft sound of something once sacred ending. But silence in the age of outrage is never enough. Within hours, social media renamed it the divorce of the ungrateful. Posts, memes, and viral videos dissected every lyric Keith had ever written. And when he performed at the Ryman Auditorium on October 4th, he closed the show with The Fighter. But again, that same haunting change. Sometimes the fight means letting go, no dedication, no explanation, just that one new line, but the crowd heard thunder. Phone videos spread faster than any official statement ever could. The same song that once stood as a symbol of love and loyalty was now treated as evidence of betrayal. And what made it sting even more was memory, because for nearly 2 decades, Keith Urban had never stopped thanking Nicole Kidman. In interviews, in award speeches, on red carpets, he called her the reason he was still alive. He credited her with confronting his addictions, forcing him into treatment in 2006, just 4 months after their wedding. How could the man who once sang his gratitude to the world now seem to rewrite that very melody? The dissonance split audiences in half. To some, he was the artist reclaiming his truth. To others, he was the husband erasing his history. Either way, the lyric had become a confession, one sung in public but felt in private, because music, like memory, isn't static. Sometimes lyrics change because the life behind them has changed. The real question wasn't what Keith Urban sang, it was why. And to find that answer, we have to go back to the very beginning, to the wound that made his songs necessary. Sydney, winter of 2006. The cameras outside St. Patrick's Estate shimmered like confetti made of light. Nicole Kidman, radiant at 39, walked down the aisle toward a man she believed she could help heal. Keith Urban, the Nashville star with chart-topping hits and the haunted past, stood waiting, wearing more than a tuxedo. He carried the weight of his own history. Behind his charming smile and musical brilliance, friends knew the truth. Sobriety was something he spoke about, not something he had yet lived. Just 4 months later, on October 19, 2006, Keith checked himself into rehab, and by his own admission, it was Nicole who made the call that saved him. I was very, very blessed that she has staged an intervention. He later told Rolling Stone he was trying to drown his insecurities in applause and almost lost himself in the process. But that night, her voice became his lifeline, her love his last chance. To Nicole, marriage wasn't rescue, it was responsibility. To Keith, love became the rehab he couldn't leave. But recovery, especially under the spotlight, is a private act performed in public. Every camera flash became a test of sincerity. Every headline, a reminder of what he almost lost. Inside those rehab walls, he was a stripped bare. Everything you used to rely on is gone, he once said. And in that emptiness, Nicole appeared quietly, bringing him books, letters, and the steady presence that fame could never offer. Outside, tabloids mocked her devotion, Hollywood's new rehab bride. One headline sneered, but inside she stood by him with the same grace she's known for her whole life. When he finally completed treatment, Keith told The Guardian in 2007, "I came out a free man thanks to her patience." Still, that balance was fragile. Gratitude at first was a gift, but over time it began to feel like a debt. Every interview demanded the same story, how Nicole saved him, how love cured him. To the world, she was the saint. To Keith, she became the mirror that never lied. And in that reflection, he saw both redemption and dependence. Over the next decade, the wound slowly hardened into art. Keith Urban turned pain into melody, and The Fighter became his most powerful confession, a love letter wrapped in rhythm, born from those fragile promises made inside a rehab room. When audiences heard it, they felt romance. But when Nicole Kidman heard it, she heard a confession, a vow to never forget the hand that pulled him back from the edge. And for a time, that vow held, but even the sincerest gratitude, when repeated endlessly under the glare of fame, can start to lose its grace. As the years passed, the story that once saved Keith's career began to define it. Every red carpet, every award show, every headline, he was still the man who was rescued. Still the husband who owed his salvation to his wife. Still the miracle story Hollywood loved to replay. It was flattering, but it was also a prison, a gilded one built from praise and memory. Because when your entire identity becomes someone else's heroism, you stop being the man you once were. Keith often said, "Music is my therapy." But even therapy, if repeated too long, can reopen old scars. Recovery gave him a second chance. Music gave him proof he'd earned it. But gratitude, that endless echo of thank you, started to sound like guilt. When he left rehab in late 2006, he poured every ounce of that emotion into his next album. Love, Pain, and the Whole Crazy Thing. It went platinum. To the public, it looked like triumph. To Keith's inner circle, it looked like atonement. At the 2008 CMT Awards, before thanking his label, his producers, even his fans, he thanked Nicole first. It was always her name first, always her shadow behind every spotlight. Producer Dan Huff once told Billboard, "Keith works like a man who owes someone everything." And maybe he did. For a while, that sense of debt fueled brilliance. By 2013, he'd earned 4 Grammy Awards, his voice stronger, his lyrics cleaner, his performances steadier. Nicole's career soared beside him. The Hours, Big Little Lies, each role a reflection of grace under pressure. To the world, they were unshakable, a couple reborn from crisis. To themselves, they were simply learning how to breathe again. But even miracles cast long shadows. In 2016, during a CBS News interview, Keith said something that seemed small at the time, but now sounds almost prophetic. The hardest part of marriage isn't the storm, it's the calm. He was talking about the weight of expectation, the invisible demand to remain the man she had fixed. Nicole's filming schedule pulled her between London, Los Angeles, and Sydney. Keith's tours spanned continents and time zones. They were in love, but often in different worlds. Distance doesn't create problems. It magnifies the ones that never healed. Their bond survived through handwritten notes, late-night calls, and the same devotion that had once saved them both. But cracks had started to whisper through the silence. By 2017, they released The Fighter, the duet that re-cemented their public image as the perfect pair. Hand in hand on a stage at the ACM Awards, they smiled as the crowd roared. It looked like triumph, but triumphs have half-lives. Because the more a song becomes a symbol, the less room it leaves for truth. The years rolled forward, and the rhythm of gratitude became a script both of them knew by heart. Public perfection, private fatigue, every interview, every award speech, every love song repeated the same refrain, how Nicole Kidman saved Keith Urban and how he'd never stop thanking her. But even love can erode under the weight of repetition. By 21-22, Nicole's tone had shifted. In an interview with Vanity Fair, she reflected, "Marriage is a dance. Sometimes one leads, sometimes both get lost." Her words weren't bitter, but they carried distance, a quiet acknowledgement that something inside that once flawless rhythm had changed. Keith's new songs echoed that shift. Tracks like A Street Called Maine and Wild Hearts whispered of loneliness, of missing home. But the home wasn't a place, it was a person, it was her. Behind every chord lingered the ghost of a promise made in 2006, a vow to stay no matter the storm. But vows don't always survive the calm. Gratitude can power a man for years until it begins to demand a rewrite. He was still climbing, but somewhere deep down, the fall had already begun. Then came September 2025. The silence that followed was deafening. Court filings from Nashville Chancery Court, dated September 30th, confirmed what fans feared. Nicole Kidman had filed for divorce after 19 years. No mention of infidelity, no accusations, just irreconcilable differences. And yet, the world filled in the blanks with fury. Entertainment outlets scrambled for clues. Then came the video. Keith performing in Las Vegas just days before the filing. His smile seemed forced. His ring gone. And at the end of the show, he closed with "The Fighter." But once again, that changed the line. Sometimes love means letting go. By dawn, the clip had reached 2.4 million views on TikTok. The caption read, "He changed the lyrics after the divorce." And just like that, coincidence became evidence. Rumors spread faster than truth. A gossip blog in Nashville claimed Keith was growing close to a younger guitarist on tour. No photos, no proof. But in the age of pixel and projection, absence becomes guilt. Rolling Stone Country quoted an unnamed insider, "Keith's too comfortable with the attention. It's not the Keith we knew." His management tried to quiet the storm with a single-lined statement. Mr. Urban's set list changes nightly and are not directed at any individual. It didn't help. Public sympathy rushed to Nicole, the graceful silent figure who had once saved him. On social media, under every tour post, the top comment read, "The man she saved just broke the song she gave him." The next 1,000 comments were worse. But then one rare voice rose from the noise. Country legend Vince Gill, Keith's longtime friend, told Billboard, "Keith's gratitude for Nicole was never fake. People change. Respect doesn't evaporate overnight." It was a defense, but a quiet one. And in the world of algorithms, quiet never wins. By October 10th, the story had grown larger than the marriage itself. Variety and The Guardian called it a cultural reckoning when gratitude turns to guilt. Headlines framed Keith Urban not as a villain, but as a symbol of how love stories can suffocate under the weight of being perfect. Keith canceled his upcoming Australian tour, citing personal reasons. Then, in a black and white Instagram video, he appeared without guitar, without smile, and said only one line, "Every song has ghosts. I'm learning which ones to keep." The internet split again. Was it remorse or spin control? Was it a confession or just a lyric? But in today's world, ambiguity is unforgivable. The crowd didn't want reflection. They wanted a villain. And slowly, Keith's fall wasn't a crash. It was a fade. One performance, one rumor, one silence at a time. He had once stood on the stage singing about loyalty. Now he stood on trial for interpretation. Mid-October 2025, Nashville nights hummed with rumor and regret. Outside at Keith Urban's studio, the lights stayed on long past midnight, but inside, everything was dark. There were no guitars, no laughter, no rehearsals, only silence. And that silence had its own kind of echo. Since canceling his Australian tour, Keith hadn't been seen in public for over a week. Reporters camped at the gates, desperate for a glimpse, but caught only faint sounds, a single chord played over and over again, a repetition so relentless it sounded less like music and more like someone trying to make sense of pain. According to the Tennessean, dated October 16th, Keith Urban had officially withdrawn from all appearances, requesting privacy while addressing personal matters. It wasn't rehab this time, it was retreat. A close friend, speaking anonymously, told the press, "He stopped talking, stopped texting, just works the same riff. Over and over, he's trying to find meaning again." For the first time in nearly 2 decades, The man who once sang gratitude into every microphone had nothing left to say. Across the Pacific, Nicole Kidman was photographed leaving a cafe in Sydney. No ring, no entourage, no comment, just calm. Her quietness became the punctuation to their story. Because sometimes silence says everything. For years, Keith Urban had sung about redemption, how love saved him from destruction. Now he faced the hardest part of that truth. What happens when redemption no longer has an audience? In a 2020 Variety interview, he once admitted, "I don't handle shame well. It's the old trigger." And now that trigger had returned. Only this time, there was no stage to drown it out. Social media turned his silence into guilt. Every day without a statement became an accusation. He said he wasn't reading any of it, but a studio technician told AP News that he'd seen the browser tabs open on the mixing desk at 3 a.m. Security footage caught him pacing in the parking lot, phone in hand, never calling. The same man who could fill stadiums now couldn't finish a sentence. When the story becomes unbearable, sometimes the only protest left is stillness. And so he sat at the piano and let it breathe. 2 chords, then nothing, letting the silence do the talking because words had already been twisted beyond repair. Then, on October 22nd, a single post appeared on his official account. No caption, no context, just a photo, an empty stage. The caption read, "Every song ends in quiet." Fans didn't know it then, but behind that quiet, Keith Urban had started writing again. Sources from Universal Music later confirmed he was working on a demo titled Grace Note. No lyrics were leaked, only a single line is scribbled on the wall. Forgiveness has its own key, and I'm still tuning. Those who heard the melody said it sounded unfinished, fragile, human, like a man learning to speak without defending himself. Because sometimes collapse isn't failure, it's the moment before understanding. As the headlines began to cool in late October 2025, something unexpected started to shift. The noise faded, and in its place came a quiet kind of hope. Keith Urban's team confirmed that he was back in the studio, not recording for fame, but for forgiveness. He wasn't giving interviews. He wasn't defending himself. He was creating something new, or perhaps something truer. Industry insiders in Nashville told Billboard that Keith was planning a one-night charity event called Songs for Second Chances. No press, no posters, no promo tour, just a night of music at the Ryman Auditorium. Proceeds would go to the Betty Ford Center, where he'd first entered treatment in 2006, and to a women's shelter long supported by Nicole Kidman. The idea, they said, was his. "If the music saved me," he told one confidant, "maybe it can help someone else now." Word spread quickly. Fans flooded comment sections with cautious optimism. This is the Keith we remember. There was no release date, no official statement, just quiet movement toward redemption. Collaborators described him as calm, focused, and deeply changed. One guitarist told the Tennessean he wants to play the old songs exactly as they were written. No edits, no hidden messages. And that mattered, because what angered the public most wasn't just rumor. It was the fear that he had rewritten gratitude. Now it seemed he was determined to restore every line. If the concert happens, he plans to open with The Fighter, the original lyrics, untouched, followed by several songs about recovery, hope, and letting go. Even Antonia Kidman, Nicole's sister, is rumored to attend, her quiet support bridging the space between two lives once intertwined. Whether Nicole Kidman herself will appear remains unknown, but the speculation has softened. Curiosity has replaced judgment. As Vince Gill, Keith's longtime mentor, recently said, Keith's not chasing redemption anymore, he's living it. Maybe that's the real story now. Not a grand apology, but quiet consistency. Not public absolution, but private grace. No matter when Songs for Second Chances takes place, its meaning is already clear. Redemption isn't a headline, it's a habit. And perhaps that's why, in the weeks since the divorce became public, streams of The Fighter have surged by over 200%, as if the world itself is ready to forgive, not forget, but forgive. Because forgiveness, like love, doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it means moving forward without resentment. As of late October 2025, Keith Urban remains in Nashville, recording quietly, volunteering with recovery programs connected to the Biddy Ford Foundation. His career earnings hold steady, but his focus has shifted from survival in the spotlight to peace in the silence. Across the ocean, Nicole Kidman is filming a new limited series in Australia titled Grace of Silence, a name that feels autobiographical. When asked if she still believes in happy endings, she smiled and said softly, "I believe in honest ones." That's the only comment she's made since the filing, and maybe the only one she ever will. Between them now lies no feud, no spectacle, just two people who learned that love doesn't always end with fury. Sometimes it ends with peace. A friend close to the couple told the Tennessean they stopped being each other's story and started being their own. And maybe that's what maturity looks like. Not passion, not punishment, but understanding. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean coming back. Sometimes it means moving on with grace. Maybe somewhere, in separate rooms, oceans apart, they both still hum the same chorus that once bound them together. Keith Urban's upcoming demo, Grace Note, is said to carry that same melody. Unfinished, uncertain, but deeply human. No apology, no love letter, just a continuation of a lesson still being learned. Because in the end, the legacy of Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman isn't scandal or betrayal or sorrow, it's endurance. It's proof that love can evolve, that endings can stay kind, and that silence can carry meaning louder than any song. Maybe the shocking truth was never betrayal at all, but realization. That gratitude isn't a story you tell once on stage. It's a promise you live quietly every day. And sometimes love saves you only long enough to teach you how to save yourself. In the end, what remains of Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman isn't betrayal or guilt or even tragedy. It's transformation. For 19 years, they carried each other through addiction, through fame, through silence. She taught him how to heal. He taught her that love can exist even in brokenness. And when their story finally ended, it wasn't with blame, but with understanding. Because sometimes love doesn't last forever, it just lasts long enough to change you. Keith Urban once said, "Every song has ghosts. I'm learning which ones to keep." And perhaps that's what we all do. We keep the ghosts that made us better. We keep the songs that taught us who we are. We keep the love that saved us, even if it no longer stays beside us. Nicole Kidman remains the woman who saved him. Keith Urban, the man who finally learned to save himself. Two souls who shared the same melody, and when it ended, chose to let it fade with dignity. That's not betrayal, that's grace. And maybe that's the shocking truth we were meant to see. That love doesn't need to last forever to be real. It just needs to leave us changed. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on your own grace note, the one lesson or love that shaped who you are. Share it in the comments below, because every story, even one that ends, can still teach someone how to begin again. And remember, love doesn't have to last forever to be true. It only has to change us before it leaves. If you believe that too, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more untold stories from behind Hollywood's brightest lights and darkest hearts.